I'm Connor Rebush, and if you are interested in the finer points of face punching, you've come to the right place. This is Heavy Hands. Ladies, gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Heavy Hands. I believe you are listening to episode 53 of this show, which seems impossible. We're well over the halfway mark to 100 episodes. If you've been with us here since the beginning, I'm so sorry. This is your host, Connor Rebush speaking. I am joined today by Patrick Weidman. And before we begin, I should mention, as I have forgotten to so many times, that we are brought to you by BloodyElbow.com, very proudly. And on BloodyElbow.com, I had an article go up this morning, Pat, which was about a neat little trick that one of our fighters that we'll be discussing today seemed to have learned almost overnight since his last fight, and that's Andrei Arlovski's tricky little back fist. And that's an interesting thing to talk about because the back fist with which Andrei Arlovski knocked down and stunned Travis Browne last weekend in the main event, I'm sorry, not in the main event, my God, it wasn't even the co-main, it was the second fight on the pay-per-view card. Mm-hmm. That little back fist he used was kind of a new wrinkle for Andrei Arlovski. And so Pat and I got to talking about things like that, and we were thinking, why not talk today about change in combat sports, or more specifically change over the course of a specific fighter's career? Can a fighter really change, or are the aspects of his personality, are the traits that are endemic to his personality always going to be there, both the good and the bad? And then that got us to talking about confidence. How important is confidence to a fighter? And so today we're really going to try to address the mental aspects of fighting. We're going to talk about fighters trying to reach their peaks during camps. We're going to talk about matchmaking and how it plays into confidence and helps us see the best versions of each respective fighter that we could possibly hope to see. So, Pat, why don't we talk about Andrei Arlovski first? Do you think Andrei Arlovski is a different fighter today, essentially, than he was at the start of his career?
Not in any meaningful way. I think that he's lost some of his foot speed. I think that he's not quite as quick in his movements as he used to be, but I think he makes up for that by being more efficient. Instead of taking 3 or 4 steps, he only takes 1 or 2. He's got a better understanding of distance and where he's at in the cage. I think that his hand speed is exactly the same as it's always been. I think he's the same kind of puncher that he's always been. He's got a couple new tricks, but for the most part, I think he's basically the same guy he's always been.
And that's kind of a funny thing because I think despite that, we're seeing different things from Arlovski. And I agree with you. I almost think it boggles the mind to think about it because Andrei Arlovski is, how many years old is he? Is he 33?
I think he's 35 or 36.
Oh, wow. Okay, so, and he started fighting, that makes sense, actually, because he started fighting when he was 20 years old in 1999.
He is 36.
Yeah, 16 years ago. So, as a 36-year-old, Andrei Arlovski is, by all appearances, if not identical, very similar to the fighter that he was at 20 years old in terms of attributes, in terms of his quickness. Pat, you said you think his foot speed's a little slower. I think that's probably true. But for the most part, he hasn't really degraded that much, which over a 16-year career is pretty remarkable. But the weird thing is we are seeing a much different and more confident Andrei Arlovski than we have seen in many years, particularly over that rough 4-fight losing streak when he was just fighting, some of the best guys in the world and getting battered by each and every one of them 4 times in a row. So...
Yeah. I mean, he got knocked out by some of the biggest punchers in the history of mixed martial arts.
Oh, yeah.
In that run. And I think that to some extent that got lost in all of the discussion around Arlovski's chin, which frankly, let's be real, Arlovski never had the most granite of granite chins. Like he was never a Fabricio Verdum or a Mark Hunt in the sense that he could just take those shots. if he had to. I mean, he was always a guy who had a questionable
Yeah,
chin. I think his first fight he got knocked out.
It's wrong to call Andrei Arlovski chinny. I think rather you can just look at it as among heavyweights, Matt Hume on the brain, some of whom are just, these titanic creatures of granite and iron. Andrei Arlovski has a human chin.
Yes.
And that's really all there is to it, because Andrei Arlovski has faced some very heavy hitters, and being a heavy hitter himself, he was once very prone to trading with those punchers, to getting a little over-aggressive, or to getting a little reckless, in his exchanges, and then he would get caught. And of course, you get caught by a guy who hits that hard, chances are you're going to, if not go out, at least get hurt.
And that, I think, is the big difference here. I don't think that Arlovski, and this may be splitting hairs, Connor, so let me know what you think. I don't think it's necessarily that Arlovski is any less aggressive than he used to be. I think he is less reckless by a long stretch.
No, I think that's a great distinction to make, because I think, we saw against Travis Brown, we had some tremendous bursts of aggression from Arlovski. Just completely all-out offensive onslaught. At one time, he did get a little reckless and got knocked down. Mm-hmm. So, he's still capable of being reckless when he needs to, but I think that's the difference. And so that's really the kind of change that we're going to be talking about today is, I think, Pat, that training a fighter from the very beginning is not so much about technique. I know we talk about technique a lot. All of the articles I write are pretty much, with very few exceptions, they're about technique, sometimes very specific, minute details of technique. And that stuff fascinates me. I love flawless technique, and I love understanding the purposes behind flawed technique and where it comes from. I find it fascinating. But more important than technique is cultivating a fighter's confidence. And to do that, you either have to do your damnedest to fix the flaws that are endemic to his personality, or you have to cover them up in some way. And I think that finally, 16 years, maybe you could say 14 years or so, probably since his fight with Anthony Johnson, which was actually a really good performance from Arlovski, since around that time, Arlovski has finally learned to cover up the flaws that used to get him in trouble so frequently. Would you agree?
I would, yeah. I think that he has in large part fixed a lot of those. Like, if we look back at Arlovski's run over the last, let's say, 7 years or so, since that just brutal knockout loss to Fedor, when Arlovski was winning the fight, had Fedor backed up to the ropes, went to throw a flying knee, and got clocked midair and was just on the canvas, eyes open, knocked out for a while. It was a scary knockout. I really think that Arlovski actually hit rock bottom when he fought Travis Fulton, the Iron Man Travis Fulton, who's had hundreds of fights, I think Arlovski was only the second guy to knock him out. But Fulton was 2 rounds ahead going into the very end of the fight. Arlovski managed to knock him out with a head kick with 1 second left in the fight. That to me was Arlovski's rock bottom, when he would have lost a decision to Travis Fulton. Knocking Fulton out at the last second, and then which kind of inaugurated his recent run in every meaningful sense. Like from the perspective of confidence, that was everything. Arlovski turned it all around in one head kick. He managed to get back to realizing that, oh yeah, no, I can still do this. You know?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for a guy who is a puncher, to know that you still have the ability to put guys away, and when so much of your past confidence was built on that. And it's you also have to note that the loss to Fedor Emelianenko came on the heels of some of Arlovski's greatest career wins. Came shortly after his win over Fabricio Verdum at UFC 70, and it came immediately after his 2 knockout wins over 2 granite-jawed heavyweights in Ben Rothwell and Roy Nelson. 2 guys who were renowned for their toughness, who Arlovski dispatched with relative ease. And so then he comes in against Fedor Emelianenko. He's probably, at a pretty high level of confidence, and then just to have everything torn away by one punch, especially when you feel like you're ahead, it sounds like a cop-out in terms of analysis, but so much of a fighter's confidence is born of luck, or rather playing the probabilities in how you match a fighter. And when we look at his record in recent years, how much of Arlovski's successes have come as a result of just being nicely brought along in terms of matchmaking. It's almost like they've brought Arlovski along the way you would a slightly accelerated version of how you would bring along a new fighter or a prospect. He's got to be a prospect again, Mm-hmm. So we had the fight with Ray Lopez, the fight with Travis Fulton, two where Arlovski was not feeling very confident, not very impressive performances. And then you got to light a fire under him by having him rematch Tim Sylvia, the guy who had beaten him twice before. Of course, a shadow of Tim Sylvia's former self, but getting to see that face again and getting to soccer kick it into oblivion had to have been a big boost for Arlovski. And since then, we've seen increasingly better and better performances. And I count the loss to Anthony Johnson among those. I think Anthony Johnson was riding a huge wave of confidence at the time, and I think Arlovski hung with him. And especially because, one of the key details that goes into Arlovski's loss in that fight, not only did the first round run overtime significantly, but in that overtime, Arlovski had his jaw broken. And despite having his jaw broken, Arlovski fought on and did pretty well, despite losing a decision. In fact, he only really lost because Johnson wrestled the hell out of him. And so that's a far cry from the guy who was happily giving away a decision to Travis Fulton just a couple years before.
Yeah, I mean, and lest you think that, lest you listeners think that we're making up this whole thing about confidence, like, you talk to just about any good coach, and at some point in that interview, they are going to mention confidence. Every coach that I've ever talked to has mentioned confidence at some point in the interview. It's a huge deal, and coaches know it's a huge deal. Really good coaches know it's a huge deal. Rafael Cordero talks more about confidence than about anything else when you interview him. Faraz Sahabi will talk about confidence. Greg Jackson talks about confidence. It's a huge deal. Like, getting your fighter to believe that they can accomplish this task that's been set before them is at least half the battle. Just the belief that they can do it, whether that's true or not, or regardless of the circumstances. Like, your guy is not going to win that fight if he doesn't believe in himself. So, like, think back to UFC 185 a couple of months ago, when we had, sitting back in the locker room, Anthony Pettis watches his younger brother get knocked out, absolutely, brutally, viciously get knocked out. On the other hand, you have Rafael dos Anjos, who's riding a 3-fight winning streak against elite competition, who's got all the confidence in the world, and he's got his cornerman, who is an irrepressibly confident gentleman, whispering in his ear, "You can do this, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this."
Contrary, he got to watch his teammate beat the shit out of his opponent that night. He got to watch Beneil Dariush get a dominant win.
Mm-hmm. That's like things like that. It's hard to point to them in the same way that you would say, "Oh, look, he's throwing this punch differently, or he's throwing this kick differently, or he's working at a quicker pace, or his cardio's better, or his wrestling's better." Like, confidence is every bit as important as those things. It's just harder for us to talk about it in kind of an empirical or analytical way.
Yeah. You could argue that it's more important than technique, honestly. You really could.
Yeah.
Because we've had plenty of fighters throughout history whose technique has been somewhat lackluster, who have maybe not been pretty fighters, but who have fought through very tough competition. I mean, Gene Fulmer beat Sugar Ray Robinson in his first tilt with him and absolutely took him apart. And not only is that an example of Ray Robinson's confidence being broken, it's an example of Gene Fulmer showing supreme confidence. And despite the fact that he didn't have, picture-perfect technique or anything, he utilized what technique he did have flawlessly because he knew that he could win. He knew it. And I know that sounds like fluff, but it is really, it's so phenomenally important. It's hard really to overstate the value of something like that. And honestly, I think confidence, again, we can't really quantify these things, but I think that at least 50% of chin is confidence and determination. Mm-hmm. Most times, unless you're getting knocked out cold, and really, cold knockouts or ones where a guy goes stiff and is literally just not conscious, those are very rare. Most knockouts, the guy still has some level of awareness, but what the knockout punch does to him is it breaks him. And a lot of fighters have what we think of as tremendous chins, even though they get dropped all the time. And it's because their focus and their determination, their confidence that they know they can get back up and continue and come back and win the fight allows them to do so. Nothing physiological is going to help you get up from a clean shot to the liver. You know what I mean? When Marcos Maidana went down in a liver shot against Amir Khan, it wasn't some kind of tougher version of liver that allowed him to stand back up. It was the fact that he refused to quit, the fact that he was confident in knowing that he could chase Amir Khan around the ring for 11 more rounds with punches, which he proceeded to do and came pretty close to winning the fight as a result.
Yeah, I mean, look at here's a good MMA example for you. Paige Vanzant, who is no great shakes, technically speaking, in any phase of the fight, but she has awesome cardio and is just super confident. And she's super confident in her ability to take damage while she wears you down. She's super confident in her cardio. And she's confident that if she just keeps doing what she's doing, you're going to quit before she does.
Yep.
Like, I think that's a really common thing among a lot of pressure fighters, especially, is just the confidence. Like, Rafael dos Anjos is a pressure fighter. It's this belief that, like, if they keep coming forward, if they keep doing their thing, you're going to quit before them.
Absolutely.
It's just it's an essential component of that kind of fighting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris Weidman, for God's sake, same deal.
Well, why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, because I want to talk about Chris Weidman a lot. I think, and there's a lot to be said about the various fighters we saw last weekend who, in some way or another, managed to turn back the clock, whether for good or for bad. So we'll talk more about Chris Weidman and confidence, and then we're going to talk about how much can these fighters really change from the people that they are at the start of their careers. Okay, wait, stop. Don't skip this break. I know you skip most of them. It's a podcast. It's not a radio show. You don't have to listen to the commercials. But if you follow my very simple instructions, you'll be doing a huge service to Heavy Hands, Pat, and myself. First, go to Stitcher.com or iTunes.com. You can use either of those services to subscribe to the show, which makes it really, really easy to listen to every episode and not have to go hunting for it on our confusing, badly designed website. Once you're there, give us a positive rating and a positive review. That means go to the little 5-star thing and click on the star all the way to the right. That's a 5-star rating. That's the best one you could possibly give us. And like 20 or 30 words about how you enjoy the show. It may not seem like much, but it's a huge help to us, and we really appreciate it. It helps us bring Heavy Hands to an ever-increasing audience, which is just good for everybody. So thank you for listening. Please take the time to give us a positive rating and review. Next time that you're on at your computer, at your phone, whatever, iTunes.com, Stitcher.com, search for Heavy Hands, give a positive rating and a review. Thank you. And now, back to the show. All right, well, when we left off before the break, we were talking about UFC middleweight champion, and still UFC middleweight champion, Chris Weidman, and the importance of confidence to fighting in MMA. And there's a video that I saw, and this will be in the show notes, bloodyelbow.com when the episode goes up, and also on the episode page on heavyhandspodcast.com. I'm going to link to this video. Be warned, it's a video on Facebook only, so you will probably be annoyed by that, and you'll be forced to read the terrible opinions of all the people in the comments. They will load before you scroll down, unlike YouTube. But in this video, it was basically posted in the last week of Chris Weidman's camp, training for Vitor Belfort. And in it, we get to hear a lot from Weidman himself. We get to hear a lot from his coach, Ray Longo, and his other coach, Matt Serra. And, in fact, I like to say trainer about these guys. Coach to me implies somebody that, like, teaches a skill set. Trainer means a lot more to me. And I think that Ray Longo and Matt Serra are very much trainers in the traditional sense, because they will take a fighter and help him become a better version of himself. As far as that pertains to fighting, but also just in life. And that's what I think a lot of trainers strive to do for their fighters. And the topic of this video was basically peaking. They were talking about trying to get a fighter to peak at the right time during his camp. And Longo made a very interesting comment at one point during the video. He said, you could have a guy 2 weeks out from the end of a camp, and he will peak. He will have a tremendous performance in sparring. Maybe 2 days in a row, he'll just do he'll just kick ass in sparring, and nobody will be able to touch him. He will look supremely confident. He'll be just as aggressive as you want him to be, just as cautious as you want him to be. Everything will look great. Everything comes together. And at that point, Ray said, you just say, that's it, we're not sparring anymore. Because you don't want your fighter to peak too soon and then have the edge wear off. And that you hear that kind of thing a lot, but you tend to think of it in terms of the physical manifestation. How is their technique looking? But what you're really trying to do, at least as far as I understand it, is to control your fighter's confidence. Because if you give him those 2 fantastic days of sparring, and then he gets, maybe he does even 80% as well the next day. He gets dinged a few times. He is now going to have 80% of the confidence he had coming off of those 2 phenomenal days where he was at his physical and mental best. And so you want to try to get your fighter to ride that mental high and even to escalate it if you can into the fight so he feels like he's capable of beating anyone.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the very best coaches are master mental manipulators in that sense.
Yes.
That guys, really elite coaches, and this is true of Longo and Serra for sure. And having interviewed both of them, I think I can speak to this. Really elite coaches strive to understand not just their fighters' bodies or what their fighters want to do in a cage. They try to understand their fighters' minds. They try to understand what's going on upstairs, and really good coaches encourage dialogue between themselves and their fighters. That's why I think the trainer term that you put on them, Connor, is really appropriate, because I think a coach is more or less telling you what to do. They're teaching you something.
Yeah.
Whereas I think the trainer label implies a closer relationship. It implies back and forth. It
implies learning from, like you can train a plant to vine. You can't tell a plant to vine up a trellis or something. You know what I mean? You have to train it. You have to cultivate it. You have to listen to what it needs and give it that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's a coincidence that these really elite coaches think a lot in terms of dialogue. They think a lot in terms of back and forth, that they want their fighters to tell them how they're doing and how they're feeling and what they think. When I interviewed Longo, we went back and forth for probably 5 minutes where he was just describing conversations he had with his fighters about technique and about their upcoming opponents and what they wanted to do and whatnot, and things that and the direction that he helped them move in. So, he talked about, I mentioned this fighter to Al Iaquinta, and then Al went off and watched a bunch of them, and Al really liked him. And so then he came back and we talked about him. He was talking about James Toney and James Toney's defense and how James Toney likes that kind of crab. So that's just one specific example, but it's about that back and forth and that kind of implicit or explicit agreement on what you're doing is a confidence building tool. It's a way of showing that everybody's on the same page and everybody's working towards the same goal. That's not a meaningless kind of data point here. That's a real thing.
No, not at all. And it's important to note that for a long time now we've had other sports where the athletes are getting into sports psychology and finding ways to improve their performances. I think that kind of thing, I think it's actually probably better to have a trainer who understands the mental side of the game more than a separate sports psychologist, because you want the one who understands your mentality to be the one who tells you how and why to train.
Yes.
You want that to be the person directing your training. But I think that ability to cultivate a certain mentality, or to cover up flaws, or to over the long run fix those flaws if at all possible, and even to boost things that you're already confident about, that is more important in fighting than it probably is in any other sport. And I don't mean that as a disparagement to other sports. I just mean that when you are being deliberately hit in the face over and over again, it is shockingly easy to lose confidence. You can have, I'm going to piss some people off here, Pat, so just prepare, buckle yourselves in. But if you take a lot of people from the traditional martial arts backgrounds, and I kind of hate the phrase traditional martial arts, because boxing and wrestling are traditional martial arts, as is Muay Thai, and nobody ever thinks of Muay Thai as a traditional martial art, even though it predates karate. But if you take people from like an Eastern, karate, Kung Fu, things like that, Wing Chun, Tai Chi, whatever the art happens to be, they will have phenomenal principles and concepts that are being trained in their art. I have absolutely no qualms with the concepts of Wing Chun, for example. I think the ideas of controlling the center line, of attacking straight and beating your opponent to the punch by going inside, countering inside, those are fantastic principles, and I can't disagree with any of them. But when you see most Wing Chun practitioners put up against somebody who is just used to being hit in the face, even if it's sometimes a street fighter, they will suddenly look much less capable. And it's because you cannot really separate the confidence required from fighting from the technique required for fighting. The two are they're two halves of the same whole. You know what I mean? You can't fake confidence. You get hit in the face one time and it all crumbles. And that even happens to pro fighters. You see fighters break in fights all the time.
Well, that's the saying. What's the saying in jiu-jitsu? If you punch a black belt in the face, he becomes a brown belt.
Yeah.
You punch him again, he becomes a purple belt. Like that's we don't hear quite as much about that from jiu-jitsu people as we used to. I think in large part because of the kind of ongoing separation between like competition-oriented gi grappling and kind of rougher, dirtier, meaner. MMA-oriented no-gi grappling that's starting to incorporate a wider variety of techniques and places more emphasis on ground strikes and integrates wrestling with jiu-jitsu a little bit better than kind of the older style gi jiu-jitsu. But that used to be something that got talked about constantly. It was just the act of punching somebody in the face. Those kind of jiu-jitsu practitioners, Hickson Gracie being one of them for sure, like knew that if you just kept punching a guy in the face, he was going to forget his technique.
Yeah.
You know? And so in large part, I think that comes back to the point that you made about confidence and shin. Like just being able to focus, and even despite the fact that you're being hit in the face repeatedly or getting hit in the body too, Jesus, eating a clean liver shot or just getting like straight teeped in the stomach is a drastically unpleasant experience. It is not fun. It's really easy to forget whatever it was you were trying to do before that happened. But if you're confident, if you know that you can take the shot because you've eaten them before, then suddenly it changes things. Like look at Dos Anjos versus Pettis. Like Dos Anjos ate a lot of shots from Anthony Pettis in there. Not a lot of them incredibly cleanly, right on the chin. But he knew that he could take those kind of half-deflected shots because he knew that he was going to hit Pettis back twice as hard.
Sure. And on the contrary, you look at Pettis and the way that he reacted to being hit. Somebody who's not used to being hit that way, somebody who's not used to people walking through his punches. You know, it can be the opposite. The other guy's apparently unbreakable chin can do a lot to break your own confidence and therefore make your chin worse, can make you feel like you can't take the kind of shots that he's eating, so how much better are you than him, really? You know, and when you see fighters like standing in the corner of a ring in the gym and their trainer is just bashing them in the belly with a medicine ball, that's not really building their muscles, you know? That's not going to build your abs to defend a body shot the same way that a couple sets of planks or sit-ups will. Or an ab roller, for example, a nice hard ab workout. But it builds up the experience where you now know what it's like to be hit by a heavy, hard object right in the guts, and you realize that you can continue to do it. When a guy is pounding you in the body with a medicine ball for a minute straight, that's not going to happen in a fight. A guy's going to hit you with a couple of precise shots, and when you feel those, you thought that hurt, but I've done this in training. And this isn't supposed to be a recommendation for guys to get beat up for the experience of it, which I think is what that's the point that tends to be misconstrued when you will speak to somebody from a traditional martial arts background and you will say, "Oh, well, have you ever been hit in the face, or do you spar hard?" And the reaction to that is that's a knucklehead mentality. And obviously, only hard sparring is not a good idea. And deliberately getting hit in the face so that you know what it feels like is not a good idea. You can't train chin, but you can train the confidence that bolsters your chin. And part of that is just knowing that you can be hit and be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think if we're looking at kind of the broad stretch of MMA training practices, this whole confidence thing has given a lot of gyms over the years the wrong idea, where the lesson that they take from that is that you have to spar hard all the time, and that's bullshit. You don't have to go in there and wail on each other every day. The hard sparring does serve a purpose, though. It serves to train your killer instinct, and it trains your aggression, and it trains that confidence in the sense that you know that when you have to, you can take that shot. But that's not the same thing as just going in there and kicking the shit out of each other like they used to do at Shoot They Box and like they used to do at Militich, where guys would routinely get knocked out and then placed right back in the sparring rotation. That's not productive. That doesn't help.
Yeah.
After past a certain point, and they passed that point probably in the first round of that sparring session, where that was actually a helpful thing for them to do.
Yeah, there are probably great trainers who would disagree. For example, I know Manny Stewart had tons of hard sparring at his gym, at the Kronk gym, and that's a legendary gym, and Manny Stewart he probably has one of the most impressive resumes of any trainer in combat sports history. Lennox Lewis, Vladimir Klitschko, Andy Lee is wrecking people right now, Thomas Hearns, he had a hand in some of history's greatest fighters. But, personally, and from my experience, I would love to hear a coach who disagrees with me on this and have a discussion about this. But sitting here, I can say that hard sparring is a test. You know what I mean? It's a pressure test of the things that you have learned. Hard sparring is not much of a learning experience. It's a teaching experience. Hard sparring is where you are taught that you can take a certain amount of punishment. You're taught that your technique still works when a guy's swinging for the fences. And you're taught that the openings you've been practicing are still there. But going in hard sparring as if it is the only way to learn how to fight is a recipe for, if you do nothing but hard spar, and I've been the victim of this myself, you will not learn to fight so much as you will learn to survive. And you can do a lot of great things in fighting by surviving, but you can't really win a fight that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it really limits your creativity if all you do is spar hard, because you end up being so focused on not getting knocked out or not eating just a tremendous amount of punishment that it limits your freedom to experiment and play and try things out that you're going to need to try in a fight. Yeah. Because like if you do a drill, right, and you throw an 8-punch combination in this drill and then finish with a kick, that's one thing. Then you go to spar light and maybe you can do 4 punches and a kick. Then you go to spar hard and it's 2 punches and a kick. You get into a fight and you're throwing 1 punch. Yeah. Like hard sparring, it really limits the things that you can do in there because you're worried about what your opponent is going to do to you in a way that you're not in a play sparring session. Yeah. And if we're talking about confidence, like it's great to have confidence in your chin, but you need to have confidence in your ability to hit a 3-punch and 1 kick combination as well.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that if you're in there just wailing the shit out of each other.
There's, I guess I would like to point out that some great fighters are produced from a high intensity, constant hard sparring environment. In fact, all of the great black fighters from the first half of the 20th century, the Black Murderers Row, as they were called, guys like Archie Moore was one of them, Charlie Burley, many
Henry
great
Armstrong.
fighters. Yeah, exactly. And then later eras of fighters like George Benton, these guys were products of times in which they were not getting the kind of paydays they were supposed to get. They had to fight all the time, and they had to go around and spar with people as professional sparring partners. And so that made them defensive masters. And those guys were really, truly special in that they were basically having what amounted to a constant hard sparring or fighting environment. They were constantly going against people who were trying to knock them out, and as a result, they became some of history's greatest defensive fighters because they did exactly what Pat said before. They learned first how not to get hit by anything, and then slowly through experience and grit learned how to turn that into an effective fighting style where they were just negating everything the other guy did. In a lot of ways, that's the American style of boxing. So you have to give credit to that. But that brings us back to our original point, which is on cultivating confidence. And while some fighters may benefit from that, the great majority have different personalities who will not survive that kind of environment. They're not built for that kind of environment. So let's talk about Chris Weidman. What did you see in terms of confidence in Chris Weidman's performance against Vitor Belfort?
Well, it looked to me from the opening bell that Weidman was just not scared of anything that Belfort could do to him. That it didn't look to me like there was a question in Weidman's mind that he was going to take everything that Belfort threw at him and that he was going to give it back to him 10 times as worth or 10 times as bad,
Yeah.
So, like, even in the midst of that flurry, which looked scary as hell as it was happening, Like I know I was scared as hell for Weidman as that was going on, thinking that, oh my God, this can't be happening. Vitor's just wailing on a defenseless Chris Weidman. When you go back and you actually rewatch that, Vitor throws a grand total of 25 shots in that sequence. Only 3 of them land cleanly, and probably 3 or 4 more of them land kind of as glancing shots. But like Weidman was fine, and after the first couple, Vitor was basically doing nothing but wearing himself out on Weidman's gloves, forearms, and elbows.
Yeah, and let's not try to paint it as something other than it was. Chris Weidman's defense was not great or nuanced, but Chris Weidman's confidence was such that he knew he could wait out the storm. He could absorb whatever glancing shots may have snuck through his arms and gloves. He could wait there, and then he could come back. And he did. He got caught, actually, when he returned to range, when he started moving again. But then he immediately retaliated by sticking, and Chris Weidman has a viciously hard jab when he wants to. And stuck a jab in Vitor's face, got Vitor thinking twice, and then right when Vitor was thinking, oh, he can hit me back, I forgot he's allowed to do that, Weidman took him down, retaliated some more, and just beat the absolute snot out of Vitor on the ground. And that, to me, is the mark of a fighter who was well cultivated in his training camp. Not by hard sparring, not by being shown that he can take a beating like the kind that Vitor tried to put on him, but just by, knowing that he can. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase this. It's I doubt that Ray Longo and Matt Serra are having Chris Weidman constantly being beaten up in his camp.
No, I think that we didn't talk a whole lot about this when I interviewed either one of them. I think they grapple really, really hard. I think they grapple and wrestle very hard, but I don't think that they spar hard per se all the time. They definitely do. And Weidman, I've heard from a lot of people, is an absolute animal when you let him in sparring. Like if you put him in there and you say, okay, Chris, we're sparring hard today, he's going to try and knock people out.
Yeah.
He's absolutely going to try and do that. He's that kind of guy. And Longo told me a story about one of Weidman's very early sparring sessions. Like I think the first time that he sparred, like he found a dirty ass, like somebody from another source, they said that Weidman just found a dirty ass mouth guard lying on the ground in the gym, picked it up, washed it off, put it in his mouth, and went in there and sparred. But then Longo told me like the dude that he was sparring was like was an undefeated amateur boxer, like, and Weidman went in there and ate the guy's lunch, just beat the shit out of him. Like the guy was on the ground, bloody, broken, and Weidman had just taken him to pieces. This was Weidman's first sparring session ever after he started. So like if you let Weidman do his thing, he's going to try and put you down in sparring. So I would imagine that in large part what Longo has to do with a guy like that is calm him down and keep reminding him you don't need to go that hard. You can go softer, just play around, just mess around with things. And I think that judging by the creativity of all of his fighters, that has to be an effective thing. Like there have to be lighter sparring sessions where they can try out some of the creative stuff.
Yeah, and would the Weidman of a few years ago be throwing ring-cutting kicks and using the same kind of footwork and taking the same kind of angles if he wasn't allowed to do that, if he wasn't given that kind of environment?
Yeah, if you're just thrown in there and forced to survive, by 8 or 10 years into your career, you look like Vanderlei Silva, where you're doing basically exactly the same thing all the time. And it's only when then you have your own gym and you're setting your own training regimen and schedule that you take a step back and you realize, oh, I've got to develop some different skills. You sit down with your trainer again and you think, okay, we've really got to make some changes to how we're doing this.
Mm-hmm. Well, we opened up the show with the question of turning back the clock or changing over the course of a career. Two things which are kind of the same. And we had a lot of fighters on Saturday's card, and in recent memory, Andrei Arlovski is just one of many fighters who have had completely unexpected late career resurgences. He and Matt Brown and Robbie Lawler and Fabricio Verdum, these guys who appeared to be kind of lost in the middle of nowhere for a while and then came back. But then, we also have guys like Vitor Belfort and like Anthony Johnson, who showed great promise at the beginning of their careers, fell flat, and kind of continue to fall flat for many of the same reasons. So we're going to take one more break, and when we come back, we're going to look at the idea of turning back the clock and why it may or may not be possible for certain fighters. Okay, so here's another way you can help us out. Go to your couch, lift up the cushions, and scrounge around in the creases for change, lint, like bent paper clips, like a thumbtack that you stab your thumb on and then you scream alone in your living room. Throw all the stuff out except the change. All right, now take that and deposit it into your bank account or your PayPal account. Head over to heavyhandspodcast.com and click on the donate button on the right side of your screen. Whatever money you just found, which you weren't using anyway, send it to us, all right? Because Pat and I will use it. That money helps us keep this show on the air and free of charge, which is great for you. It's great for us because that way we're making a little bit of money. The donations are a huge deal for us. So please go to heavyhandspodcast.com. Any spare change that you might have lying around, hit the donate button on the right side of the screen and send it our way to help us keep this show live. Thanks. And now back to Heavy Hands. All right, folks, we are back for our final segment. Couple fighters on this card, Pat, who come to mind here. We had Anthony Johnson, who suffered a rear naked choke loss to Daniel Cormier, and boy, does that sound like the story of Anthony Johnson's career. That fight just kind of summed up all of the losses he's ever had. And Vitor Belfort, despite turning into a pretty successful counterpuncher, almost seemed like his old self again. He was the guy who needed the blitz, and when he didn't get it, he got out-grappled and lost. And then we had, contrary to those two, Andrei Arlovski, who fought very differently from his early career style and turned in a brilliant performance against Travis Brown, and Donald Cerrone, who, despite being known as a slow starter and someone with confidence issues, looked pretty damn confident and started off pretty well against John McDessie. What do you think is the difference between those two pairs of fighters, or what are your basic thoughts on those guys?
So, I mean, I think the difference is the kind of pressure really that Arlovski or that Cormier put on Johnson, and then that Weidman put on Belfort. Those guys never let up, and they never gave them a chance to be the front runners that they are. Like, I think when we're talking about confidence, right? Like, Rumble's confidence is that he hits you. If he hits you hard enough, you're going to fall down, or you're going to not want him to keep hitting you. You know,
right.
Like, and Vitor's is the same way. That, like, when Vitor hits you, he kind of he's banking on the idea that you're going to panic a little bit. Not that you're going to break necessarily, but that you're going to respect him as a result of that.
It will change the way you approach him.
Exactly. And when Johnson hit Cormier, despite hitting him hard enough, like the same way that he went down like a cow in a slaughterhouse from the shot that Rumble hit him with.
Yeah.
Like, I'm struggling to find the correct adjective because he went down like a poleaxe ox. I mean, he got. I
think a poleaxe is about the correct description.
Yeah, like when Rumble and Vitor count on you to respect their power after that, and Cormier just never respected Rumble's power, despite getting head kicked shortly after that. Like, he got kicked straight upside the head, like it was almost flush.
Yeah,
and he ate it, and he kept coming. Like, if you're a front runner and you rely on guys respecting your power to give you space, because really the Rumble's fatal flaw in that fight was that he didn't maintain his distancing. He didn't maintain his spacing.
Flung himself right into the pocket and got out wrestled as a result.
Exactly. Cormier drew out his counter and then ducked under his counter to get into the clinch. It wasn't that Cormier was blasting double legs out of nowhere.
Oh no.
It was that Rumble allowed himself to be put in position where Cormier could grind on him.
And most of those times, Johnson was even able to stop the initial shot. It was just Cormier getting it to a place where Rumble's strikes were no longer a factor, after having proven to Rumble that he could take them when they were a factor.
Precisely. And if you let Cormier in on your hips, then the fight is essentially over, unless you're John Jones at that point. Like. And so if you're Rumble, if we're trying to break this down analytically, your highest priority has to be, I will keep Daniel Cormier off my hips at all costs, right? That has to be the way that you approach it. And instead, once it became clear that Cormier wasn't going to respect Rumble's power, he thought, oh shit, I got to get this guy out of here. Instead of thinking, okay, how do I keep this sustainable? How do I keep my distance? How do I keep him? How do I keep a pace that I can continue to work at? How do I stay calm? Pick him off with a couple of shots at a time. Stuff the initial shot, create space, and get away. Like, Rumble, when Cormier had him in a single leg, instead of pushing off and getting away, Rumble tried to hit him in the face 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, that is a waste of energy right there.
Yep. He was thinking, how can I stop him before this happens anymore? Rather than, what's the correct thing to do in this situation? Because we've seen Rumble Johnson. I don't know that Daniel Cormier is objectively a better wrestler in a pure wrestling scenario than Phil Davis. Rumble had absolutely no difficulty stuffing the shots at Phil Davis, even ones where Davis was in on his hips. He just took an angle, shucked him off, and it's because Rumble was supremely confident in that fight. He came into that fight, he got the shots, he got Phil Davis to respect his power early, and then he fought as if he was fighting someone who knew they could be knocked out. And when he fought Daniel Cormier, he was against a guy who really, in his heart, Cormier fought like he knew he could not be knocked out. Whether or not that was, despite the fact that that is not true, any man can be put away, Cormier fought as if he could not be put away. And that made for a very different sounding board for Anthony Johnson's punches.
Yeah, absolutely. And that to me was the fundamental difference there. Like, Cormier's performance reminded me, I know I've mentioned this like a half a dozen times here, but it reminded me of nothing so much as Dos Anjos against Pettis, where again he fought like he couldn't be knocked out. Yeah. Like, that you just keep walking forward and you keep walking forward, and you know that eventually the other guy is going to break, and that's exactly what Rumble did. And of the 4 legitimate losses of Rumble's career, one of which was the bullshit eye poke injury against Kevin Burns, like, of the 4 legitimate losses of Rumble's career, all of them have come exactly the same way. When he got tired, he gave up his back and he got choked out.
And you could almost say he got tired because he couldn't knock the other guy out. Mm-hmm. And not because he needs to knock him out not to be tired. We have seen Anthony Johnson go we've seen him go at least 3 rounds several times in recent years and look completely fine. He looked fine against Andrei Arlovski. He looked fine against Phil Davis. He's gone multiple rounds and been okay. His cardio, I don't think, is really an issue. I think it's the fact that mental strain takes a bigger toll on stamina than anything else physical can.
Yeah, I mean, look at that is the story of white belt jiu-jitsu, is panic gassing on the bottom when a guy passes your guard.
Yep.
Like, that is the essence of white belt jiu-jitsu, and that's why, like, if you read Saulo Ribeiro's book, it's basically the first step in jiu-jitsu is to learn to survive, because once you're confident that you can survive, everything else you can build on that. You can't, but until you know that you can survive what the other guy is trying to do to you, then it's hopeless, basically, because you're going to panic, you're going to get tired, and when you're tired, you're going to get finished.
Pretty much. I want to bring up something, actually, that came up in the comments of the article I wrote before UFC 187, one of the articles I wrote, which was a gaps in the armor piece, where I basically tried to game plan for Vitor Belfort against Chris Weidman. And I went over what I thought were the 3 key points for Belfort beating Weidman, and afterwards several people in the comments said, you didn't mention the takedown. You didn't say in strategy, don't get taken down, which to me is a flawed way of thinking of strategy. Because, and I admit that I probably glossed over the takedown too much. I thought I kind of took it as a given that if Vitor Belfort was going to beat Chris Weidman, it was going to happen primarily on the feet. But to me, if you're game planning for your fighter and you tell him you cannot get taken down or you will lose, he will get taken down and he will lose. There's just nothing around it, because he's going to panic or he's going to focus too much on the takedown. He may even get knocked out as a result of thinking so heavily about the takedown that he ignores the striking threats that are coming at him. And that happens in any fight. If you say his right hand is incredibly dangerous, watch out for his right hand, he's probably going to get caught by a big left hook at one point or another, or a left head kick or something like that. And so just... go on.
I wish I could play the clip for you of Rafael Cordero talking about Mark Hunt, because he told me when I interviewed him, he's like, I never told Fabricio, not in that entire camp, that Mark Hunt has heavy hands. What's the point? Fabricio's not an idiot. He knows Mark Hunt has heavy hands. What good does it do to remind him that Mark Hunt has heavy hands?
Yeah.
Like, what good would it have told him, or what good would it have done Fabricio between the first and the second rounds of that fight for Cordero to remind him that Mark Hunt hits hard? He knows Hunt hits hard.
He just felt him hit hard.
So, but the same is true of the takedown. When it comes to strategy, what you've got to focus on is minimizing the conditions that are conducive to the opponent getting the takedown.
Yes.
Not don't get taken down. Like, look at Jose Aldo. Even Jose Aldo is the best defensive wrestler in the history of mixed martial arts, and even Jose Aldo gets taken down sometimes. What he always does is pop right back to his feet.
He's fine with getting taken down. That almost counterintuitively, the fact that Jose Aldo he doesn't feel like he's lost when you succeed in taking him down is what allows him to stop the takedown so well in the first place.
Because he knows that if you plant him on the mat, the first thing that he's going to do is create head pressure and hip out.
Yeah, and if it's so easy to get out, then what is there to worry about? And so then what makes it so hard to stop the takedown when it starts?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Or, that's not that we have a whole lot to go on, but Conor McGregor seems to have the same attitude towards the takedown. And it seems to be the new and prevailing one. It also happens to feature very prominently in the game of Carlos Condit, who's fighting this weekend.
Oh yeah,
that Condit doesn't even really worry about getting taken down because he's either going to try to hit the switch, or he's going to get you, or he's going to pull you into his guard. And once you're in his guard, he's either going to try and sweep you, or he's going to try and submit you, or then he'll again try and hit the switch. Like, he's just not worried about it. And if you're not worried about it, then most of the problems go away.
Pretty much. So what about Cerrone and Arlovski? We have, I see Johnson and Belfort as being the two fighters who suffered a total lack of confidence in their fights. I think they came into the fights with confidence, but due to the circumstances of the way the bouts played out, that confidence was stolen from them. And then we have Donald Cerrone and Andrei Arlovski, both of whom fought as if they could never have been more confident. Even when John McDessie was busting up Donald Cerrone's face and hitting him with good jabs to the body and left hooks upstairs, and even when Andrei Arlovski was brutally knocked down by Travis Brown when he got a little reckless in an exchange. Despite having no small amount of adversity in both of their fights, Arlovski and Cerrone were completely confident and in many ways appeared to be different fighters than they used to be. What's the key to that? Or do you think they were different fighters than they used to be?
I think that with Cerrone more than anybody, the effects of you can see how confidence matters for him. That I think that more than any other fighter, I'm not to call Cerrone a head case or something, but I think that emotionally he kind of walks a very fine edge, and he will tell you that he's kind of an emotional wreck leading up to a fight. That's just who he is. He's a guy who can be prone to getting in his own head, and I think a lot of the time that's why he in the past has started as slow as he has. That it's hard for him to get going, and it was hard. I mean, it was even hard for him to get going against Eddie Alvarez when he fought him last September.
And I also think it's why every single UFC embedded video or every one of the vlog videos they used to do, anyone that features Donald Cerrone in the lead up to the fight has him doing absolutely nothing related to fighting in the days before the event. He's like diving and going, he's like parasailing and hanging out with his girlfriend, drinking beers and doing whatever, but not focusing on the fight, because I think he probably knows at this point. I think experience has taught him that he will get too much into his own head if he focuses too much on the fight when it's about to happen.
Yeah, exactly. It's a problem, and Cerrone is not the only guy who's like that, who's totally inside his own head the week of the fight. I think Vitor Belfort is very much like that, and there were people who had known Belfort for a long time who told me around the time that he fought Anderson Silva that Belfort lost that fight at the weigh-in, that Vitor actually is a head case, and it doesn't take much to throw Vitor off his confidence.
Yeah.
And maybe you could say the same thing about this last fight, that once Vitor had flurried, he knew that Weidman wasn't going away, and he was like, okay, well, we're pretty much done here. We can pretty much call this an evening. But
it's a polite way of putting it.
Yeah, but with Cerrone is a dude who really relies on that confidence, and I think that he's met the perfect guy to instill that in him, in his Muay Thai coach, Henry Smith, who is awesome. I love watching him work with Cerrone. It's like they're inside each other's heads. And like when they flash to kind of a split screen of Henry Smith in Cerrone's corner on Saturday, it was like Smith knew exactly what Donald was thinking at every given moment in the fight, and so it's just a constant stream of corner instructions. Like when Greg Jackson has to shut up so another guy can do it, you know that's probably a good situation.
Yeah, and Greg Jackson's a great person to bring up too, and in the conversation of confidence and the importance of mental training, because I have no problem saying that the technical instruction at Jackson Winklejohn Gym is in many ways behind the times. I think that the MMA sphere, teams like the American Top Team and the Black Zillions, and where else is a good team? Why am I blanking so hard right now?
TriStar, AKA, Kings, Alpha Male for sure.
Yes, absolutely. I think you could easily say that all those gyms produce better technicians than Jackson Winklejohn's on a pretty consistent basis. But Greg Jackson is such a good mental trainer, such a good, he's so skilled at understanding the mentality of his fighters and at cultivating the most confident version of those fighters that he can, that he still produces champions all the time. He still has fighters at the very top of the game, despite not having the best technical instruction in the world. Then you have guys like Alpha Male, who are all superb technicians, at least in terms of grappling and wrestling and submission grappling, and more so than ever in terms of striking, and yet they've always been the bridesmaids until very recently, when they had a guy like Dwayne Ludwig, who I think just really, really gelled with TJ Dillashaw and understood his mentality. I think it really kind of proves the importance of that factor of training a fighter.
Yeah, I mean, you have to understand the guys that you're training, and you have to understand and you have to understand what motivates them and gives them confidence. I mean, like, I think the Black Zillions are maybe the quintessential example of this. Not to be too harsh on them after the last couple of weeks, but from a technical perspective, I don't think you're going to find better teachers of technique than the guys that they work with there. You know, like, those guys are regularly going to work with Pedro Diaz, who is a fantastic boxing trainer. They're working with Henry Hooft, who is a fantastic kickboxing trainer. They're working with Greg Jones, the new wrestling coach. The new wrestling coach there is an outstanding wrestling coach. They had Kenny Monday, who was an outstanding wrestling coach, an Olympic gold medalist, mind you. Like, they have the best technical instruction you can find, but there still seems to be something missing there. That when the chips are down, like, the fighters just do not seem to have that kind of extra gear, you know?
Yeah, and I think it bears mentioning that during the final seconds of Cormier Johnson, Johnson's corner, Henry Hooft was screaming at him, "Don't give up," which is not a thing you want to have to tell your fighter at a point like that in the fight.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Could you imagine Greg Jackson having to scream at Diego Sanchez, "Don't give up"?
Yeah.
Like, or at John Jones, or I mean, I guess I could see a scenario in which somebody would have to scream that at Donald Cerrone, but even then, I still don't think so.
No, and Greg Jackson will do that at the right times. You know, when a guy's confidence needs bolstering, when a guy is fighting through injury or through serious trouble, like George St. Pierre and Carlos Condit have in the past, Greg Jackson knows when to turn it on and when to try to pump them up. But desperately crying for them not to, and I don't mean crying just in a disparaging way, I mean shouting, desperately shouting for them not to give up from the corner because you see that they're about to break or that they already have, that's not an enviable position in which to find yourself as a trainer and fighter team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that is a really, really important component that we just rarely talk about in this sport. And we rarely talk about as analysts, I think, because it's hard for us to get any sort of read on from where we sit.
Yeah, and I enjoy discussing it, and I think it's become increasingly a bigger and bigger part of each of the gaps in the armor breakdowns that I do, where at least one of my points will focus on punishing a guy for using one of the tools on which his game depends. You know,
I think that's partially the essence of a style matchup, where, you know, when we've been doing this Styles Make Fight series, I think how you break a guy's confidence is you don't allow him to fight to his strengths. You don't allow him to do what he wants to do. And suddenly you've got a much better chance of winning the fight, not because it's a matter of technique, but because it's a matter of confidence.
And if fighters of a given style all have more or less the same personality or many of the same traits, and it causes them to fight in that similar way, then it starts to make a lot of sense why certain styles, you know, statistically speaking, struggle with certain other styles. It makes sense that brawlers have success with counterpunchers because they just happen to have that one area of the game mentally that tends to play on where the counterfighters are mentally weak. And when counterfighters are good against boxers, or counterfighters are good against, let's say, I don't know, pressure fighters, whatever. But you know what I mean? Like a boxer puncher would be good against a boxer because he can take away the boxer's initiative and punish him when it does end up in close range. He can really just kind of wheedle away at the area where that fighter is least confident and really expose that hole in his mentality.
Yeah, or a pressure fighter against a pressure fighter against a counter fighter, where the counter fighter is immensely confident in his ability to fire back at you. But you can't do that against a pressure fighter or a swarmer who's going to overwhelm you with information to the point where you can't fire back anymore. It's just too much for you to process at any given time. Like if you're a counterfighter who prides yourself on your ability to process information and understand exactly what your opponent's going to do and to anticipate that, when you are overloaded with information, when there is too much for you to go on, that's a matter of breaking the other guy's confidence as much as it is doing something that affects them tangibly in terms of technique or skill or even necessarily spacing in the cage or the ring.
Absolutely. And so when, when Rumble Johnson is effective, he's not only stopping Phil Davis's takedowns, he's hitting him with an uppercut as he tries for the takedown. And then he's literally just shoving him away to show how easily he stopped that double leg attempt. Or when Ioana Jędrzejczyk is beating Carla Esparza, she's not merely sprawling on the takedown, she's sprawling on it, and then as they stand up, she's just slamming a knee into Carla Esparza's solar plexus and saying, this is what you get if you try to take me down. It's more than just being able to stop what the opponent does. It's being able to take away their confidence in ever being able to use it again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're trying to, basically you're trying to turn your opponent into Pavlov's dog,
Yeah.
Like you are trying to condition them in response to particular stimuli to incentivize them to not do things that you don't want them to do, right?
And when those things happen to be the areas of their game in which they are usually most confident, they break.
Yes, that's exactly it. They break. And so, I think we've had kind of a breakthrough in terms of thinking about styles here, that in large part, your style is a matter of confidence, of where moving in which direction and in what space you feel most confident in your ability to win the fight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really interested in thinking about style matchups, because I really do think that aside from truly exceptional fighters, guys who almost transcend styles, there are just certain styles that other styles will struggle against. 90 times out of 100, they will struggle with particular type of fighter. And so, fascinating, Pat. Absolutely fascinating. And it was a hell of a card, so I'm glad we could have an enlightening discussion about something which was already just so damn fun, because I really enjoyed UFC 187.
It was great. Even from the very beginning of the card, did you catch the Fight Pass prelim with Islam Makhachev?
Yeah.
God, man. That kid is going to be the truth.
Yeah, it was like Nurmagomedov over Trujillo, but to 10, multiplied tenfold.
Yeah, he's like, I love everything about that kid's game, and I love Khabib's dad as a trainer because, I think I tweeted this during the fight, but you just cannot ever speaking of what we were talking about earlier in terms of trying to the strategy being trying to put yourself in the position to win the fight, to make certain things have the smallest percentage chance possible outcome that might hurt you in your quest to win the fight. You just can't ever let one of Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov's fighters touch you, ever. You cannot let them grab a hold of you under any circumstances, ever. Think about what a challenge that is.
Yeah.
In terms of your game planning, right?
Speaking of confidence, how do you feel confidence watching those fighters and knowing that? How do you feel confident knowing that when they get their hands on you, you're going for a ride and you probably won't be getting back up?
Yeah, that the second that you let them get their hands on you, you're going to end up on the floor, and then it's probably going to be 3 or 4 minutes before you manage to escape back to your feet.
And when you do, they're still attached to your legs, and you're going back down again.
Yeah, that is, those guys are just going to break your will.
Which is why I'm so interested in Rafael dos Anjos versus Khabib Nurmagomedov 2. Because I'm so interested to see how the confidence master, Rafael Cordeiro, will bolster the confidence of a guy who just had the biggest achievement of his career, but fresh on the heels of one of his most dominant defeats to Nurmagomedov in their first fight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, nobody has ever done that to Rafael dos Anjos before, just completely shut him down. So yeah, that'll be fascinating to see. And I mean, and the coaching matchup between the guys at AKA Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov and Rafael Cordero is one for the absolute ages.
Yes, sir.
That is an awesome coaching matchup.
No disagreement there. Well, I think it's probably time for us to wrap it up. Before we go, Pat, do you have anything coming out this week you want to share?
Nothing in particular coming out this week, just my usual preview and top 10 article on SureDog. But last Friday, my first piece for Deadspin came out. I did a freelance piece for them on the 3 UFC champions, Fabricio Verdum, Chris Weidman, and Frank Mir, who went to go hang out with the dictator of Chechnya, Ramazan Kadyrov, who is not a good guy. So I did an in-depth investigative article about this, and I would really appreciate it if you read that.
And I wholeheartedly recommend it. I'm going to keep trying to tweet it the next few days because I read the whole thing. I ate it up in 15 minutes, and it was just such a fascinating read. I think you did a really good job with it, Pat.
Oh, thank you, man. I sincerely appreciate that.
Of course. And as for me this week, well, if you're listening to this on Wednesday, yesterday I had an article come out about Andrei Arlovski, a judo chop breaking down the tricky little back fist, which he seemed to have adapted specifically for what is a limited style. So that's an example of a guy, I guess an old dog learning new tricks, still being the same dog, but having a few new tricks up his sleeve to maybe cover up some of those limitations. And then later this week, I don't know, MMA stuff. I got an article on Roman Gonzalez that's finally going to be coming out this week, maybe even the day that this goes up on badlefthook.com, and we'll have that covered on bloodyelbow.com as well. So if you didn't hear our last episode, wherein we talked quite a bit about Roman Gonzalez, El Chocolatito, you should absolutely check out that episode. You should check out my article that comes out this week, and you should check out every Roman Gonzalez fight you can get your hands on, because the man is quite possibly the best boxer on earth today. So that's coming up. I think that just about does it. Pat, they can find us on social media. If they want questions right on the show next week, by the way, you guys can tag them to us on Twitter, #HeavyBagQuestions. And Pat, your Twitter handle?
At Patrick_Wyman, and you're at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. Is that right?
That is correct. I'm so flattered that you memorized it, Pat.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know me.
And if you have longer questions or quest suggestions, anything like that, you can send them to the official show email, connor@heavyhandspodcast.com. Go to heavyhandspodcast.com to find this and all of our 52 previous episodes. And, of course, as I mentioned at the start of the show, you can find this one and all episodes for the time being on bloodyelbow.com. Thank you guys very much for listening. And if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.